They came west not to conquer, but as citizens on the move, carrying with them the habits, hopes, and hard-earned lessons of the young American Republic. The Oregon Trail, stretching some 2,000 miles from the Missouri River to the valleys beyond the Rockies, was not a road in the usual sense. It was an idea made visible on the land, an expression of resolve, optimism, and at times, extraordinary endurance. The Oregon Trail was a pathway to the Willamette Valley where the Methodist, Jason Lee, had established a mission. The path was first explored by the Wilkes Expedition in 1841, named for the United States naval officer Charles Wilkes. In 1843, John C. Fremont, a future California senator and the Republican Party's first presidential candidate, provided an accurate map of the trail. In the spring months, when the grass was new and the river still ran cold and fast, families gathered at places like Independence and St. Joseph, Missouri. Wagons stood in long, uneven lines. There were farmers from Ohio, shopkeepers from Illinois, veterans of earlier migrations, and more than a few who had never traveled more than a day's ride from home. What united them was a belief, quiet but firm, that life might be better farther on. They made their way west in wagons, not the heavy, high-sided Conestogas, but what came to be known as the Prairie schooner. West of the Mississippi, pioneers needed a wagon that was more lightweight, easier for oxen and mules to pull over long distances. The cargo beds were shallow, making them less likely to tip over across difficult terrain. Many could be dismantled for crossing rivers. The canvas covers could be seen across vast spans of the prairie, like sails on a great lake, hence the nickname schooners. Northwest of Missouri, the Oregon Trail followed the Platte River across Nebraska, then through South Pass, a 20-mile-wide, gently sloping gap in the Rocky Mountains. Forts had been established where the wagon trains could rest and resupply. 660 miles from Independence, Missouri, stood Fort Laramie. From the South Pass, the gateway to Oregon, the stalwart parties would cross the Green River Valley to Fort Bridger, named for mountain man Jim Bridger. At that juncture, they were roughly 1,070 miles past their point of origin. Along the Snake River, there was Fort Hall, then later Fort Boise. Once the pioneers crossed the Blue Mountains, they came to the Columbia River, which they followed all the way to the mouth of the Willamette River. There, they turned south into the Willamette Valley. At night, the wagons were drawn into a circle. Stories were told. Hymns were sung. Cholera was the great terror of the trail, striking swiftly and without regard to age or strength. Graves appeared along the route, some marked, many not. Yet the movement continued. To stop entirely was unthinkable. Progress, however slow, was the only answer. At landmarks like Chimney Rock and Scott's Bluff, the land itself seemed to acknowledge their passage. These were not merely geological features. They were mileposts of reassurance. The American pioneers had not simply traveled west. They had tested themselves against distance, uncertainty, and nature's indifference. The Oregon Trail was traveled by ordinary people who persevered in the faith they shared in a shared future. And in that long procession of wagons, creaking steadily toward the horizon, one could see the American story moving forward, mile by mile.